right, Mika, let's dive into the news. Front page of every newspaper in the country right now. A dive on the Dow because of this trade war now. More than $1 trillion wiped out from global markets yesterday. And President Trump's ongoing trade war with China. The Dow Jones and S&P both fell nearly 2.5%, while the NASDAQ dropped more than 3.4%. The latest market meltdown was triggered after China now announced it would retaliate for Trump's latest tariff rate increases by raising tariff rates on a wide range of American goods. President Trump commented about the situation yesterday at the White House.
We're in a very strong position. Our economy has been very powerful. Theirs has not been. We've gone up a lot since our great election in 2016. We're dealing with them. We have a very good relationship. Maybe something will happen. This is a very positive step. I love the position we're in. So our farmers will be very happy. Our manufacturers will be very happy. And our government is very happy because we're taking in tens of billions of dollars. I think it's working out very well. So we're in a very good position, and I think it's only going to get better.
And can you guarantee a trade deal with China by June 1st?
We're in a great position right now, no matter what we do. I also want to thank Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Steve. Steve just got back from China. We'll let you know in about 3 or 4 weeks whether or not it was successful. You never really know, right?
President Trump yesterday again threatened to install 25% tariffs on the remaining $325 billion worth of Chinese goods the U.S. imports each year. If that does occur, Morgan Stanley says the country could fall into a recession, and Goldman Sachs warns it could result in a 0.4% hit to U.S. GDP. Meanwhile, the president once again claimed China is paying for his tariffs.
We're taking in right now hundreds of billions of dollars. We're taking in billions of dollars of tariffs. And those tariffs are going to be tremendously, if you look at what we've done thus far with China, we've never taken in 10 cents until I got elected. Now we're taking in billions and billions. It's in the form of tariffs or taxes. And it had a tremendous impact. If you looked at the first quarter, which is always historically the worst quarter, we were at 3.2%. People were very surprised. Well, a lot of that was the tariffs that we were taking in from China. So we have tens of millions of dollars pouring into our coffers, the coffers of the U.S. Treasury.
Goldman Sachs now says the cost of President Trump's tariffs have fallen, quote, entirely on American businesses and especially households, with a greater impact on consumer prices than even expected. There currently are no indications that U.S. and China trade representatives are scheduled to meet in the immediate future. President Trump is set to meet with China's President Xi Jinping next month at the G20 in Japan. Let's bring in CNBC's Brian Sullivan. Brian, before we talk big picture, let's just be really clear about what a tariff is and what it does and who is impacted by it, not quite the way the president explains it.
Yeah, it's paid for by U.S. importers. You're China, I'm the United States, you sell me a good, I pay for it at the port of entry, and then I theoretically pass it along to consumers. That's the idea. U.S. companies pay. Larry Kudlow, our former colleague down in the White House, said that as much on Fox News on Sunday in an interview with Chris Wallace. But it's on the U.S. importer side. Right now, guys, it's mostly raw goods, but this new round of tariffs could start to impact more of the stuff that we buy directly at the stores. And if the third round kicks in, which it has not yet, that's 25% on everything that we import from China. That is shoes, toys, household goods. That's the direct pass on to the U.S. consumer.
So, Elise Jordan, I just trying to think of a way to phrase this, but you just wonder, is he deliberately trying to tank our economy? I mean, what would be the win for Donald Trump and the United States of America, and the United States of America being co-equal with the president? What's the win here for the United States?
You have to wonder if Donald Trump isn't a little bit spooked and knows that he's gotten too far ahead of his skis on this and risks tanking the economy, just because he did admit in that press conference that there's going to be the need for yet another bailout of American farmers. And so, Brian, what do you make of that $15 billion proposed bailout for American farmers that Donald Trump brought up yesterday? He didn't say how he was going to pay for it, but he did mention it and address that there is a need and that American farmers are hurt by these policies.
Well, you need to, because at least here's the thing. The majority of what we sell to China, we buy a lot from China, okay? What we sell to China is actually not that much, and it's mostly agricultural products. So yes, farmers in a lot of states, by the way, that President Trump will need to win re-election, they're going to be hurt. So he's sending out a little maybe peace offering to them, knowing that soybeans and beets and a lot of the stuff that China has now slapped tariffs on, that they're going to get some kind of a payback. But I think if you guys know more about politics than I do, but I wonder if you look at the states that the Republican candidate will have to win in 2020, those are the states, the Pennsylvanias, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, that probably in some ways like this tough talk, as long as there's ultimately some kind of a resolution. Right now, the higher tariffs have not kicked in. There's a couple-week grace period, and maybe the president is banking on the fact that he's going to be able to make a deal. But here's the thing. Last night in China, as we showed on my show on CNBC this morning, there's starting to be some anti-U.S. stuff coming out, talking about state-run media and how China has been through 5,000 years of fights and that this is not going to dissuade them.
Rick Tyler, and don't be afraid to correct me if I'm wrong on my assessment of what we've been talking about here this morning. You can go back 30 years and watch Donald Trump with Johnny Carson, and he was talking about China, and he was talking about tariffs 30 years ago, and it's clear that he still doesn't know what a tariff does to consumers in this country. And yet everything else that we've been talking about here this morning, 22 people running for president, and in the background, the White House refusing to respond to any subpoenas from Congress, and yet if you go out in the country, there seems to be a sort of, these things that are going on doesn't affect my everyday life. I'm just wondering the impact of all of this on a narcoticized country.
Well, Mike, I'll only correct you, and I do believe Donald Trump does know what a tariff is, and he does know who pays for it. Now, he said before he came in, we had not collected a dime of tariffs. That is not true. We collected $21 billion from Chinese tariffs before Donald Trump put his tariffs in. It is now at $39 billion. That's an $18 billion increase. He thinks that the way to get out of this, because as Brian said, we mostly export agriculture to China, and aviation. Boeing stock was hit yesterday, went down 5% because China is a big customer of Boeing, and now they're hitting them with tariffs. Look, this is a very high-stakes game. What would have to happen for the U.S. to win this is we would have to go to the wall. But remember, President Xi isn't up for re-election because he doesn't actually have to go through re-election. Donald Trump is, and Xi is hitting farmers, and farmers are in the essentially the red states. And so if American companies try to resupply, and they can do that, China isn't the only manufacturer in the world. There's Vietnam, Cambodia, India. They all want to replace China for manufacturing, but those things take time. But the important thing to remember is a tariff is a tax on the American consumer, and those costs, whether companies in the short term want to absorb them, that's fine, but they will not have profits. And you saw Chinese exposed stocks yesterday get hammered. Those were the stocks that lost. Every one of the Dow Industrials got hit yesterday. No one had any gains. We'll see if that stabilizes today.
But Mika, we shouldn't worry because President Trump once told us that tariff wars are easy to win, right?
They're good and easy to win.
Oh, my Lord. Here we go. We're good on that. I feel confident now.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.